Hello and welcome to this latest business leader debate. This has been a really interesting debate. We've got lots of people registered, so welcome to all our viewers as well and our panel who will introduce shortly. The title of today's debate is How Are Businesses Harnessing Artificial Intelligence? And we want to look at how companies across the UK and globally are using AI for the benefit of themselves, their sectors and their customers. To answer this question, we've brought together business and legal AI experts who will talk about their experiences of how they are using artificial intelligence and machine learning. For those of you that are watching that aren't aware of Business Leader, is a national B2B media group, and you can find out more about us via our website at www.businessleader.co.uk. And for today's event, we're partnering with law firm Moore Barlow, and you can find out more about them by visiting www.moorebarlow.com. We've got quite a lot of content to go through. It's a huge topic, and we've got some really good people around the table. But if you do have questions and you are viewing and you'd like to put them forward to our panel, you can do so by emailing questions@businessleader.co.uk, and we'll try to put as many to our panel as possible. So let's get on with today's event and introduce our panel, who are Dorothy Agnew, who is a partner at Moore Barlow and an expert in AI and the law. Morning, Dorothy.
Morning, Ollie.
We also have Stuart Dorman, who's Chief Innovation Officer at Sabio. Good morning, Stuart.
Morning, Ollie. Thanks for having me.
But Lucie Glenday, who's the CEO at MySense.AI. Good morning, Lucie.
Morning, Ollie.
We have Ben Slater, who's SVP Marketing at Beamery.
Morning, Ollie. Thanks for having us.
And Andrew Tsonchev, who's Director of Technology at Darktrace. So welcome, everybody. I'd like to start the debate just by everyone give a brief intro to their companies and also how they are using AI. So Andrew, I'll start with you. Obviously, Darktrace, I understand, were the first in your sector to do what you do. And you help businesses with cybersecurity and the threat intelligence world. So I just want to get an idea of how you are using AI in your company.
Sure. Thanks, Ollie. It's lovely to be here. As you say, it's been an interesting journey for us and my company, Darktrace, because we were sort of early adopters, first movers in preaching this stuff. And we've spent the last 9 or 10 years watching the security industry in general sort of come along the ride and pretty much wholeheartedly embrace the kind of approaches now that we've been trying to push for a long time. So we've lived through, I think, a transformation in industry, which has been quite interesting. I'm sure we'll get into it more later, but in general, in cybersecurity, you've got a lot of big data, fast frequency, complex problems that need solving. And it turns out, it's probably no surprise to anybody, that it's exactly the sort of problem space that is really malleable for applying AI for that. So I've been lucky to be part of that for the last 8 or 9 years.
Andrew, I just want to also get a sense, can you give us an example of where, your AI solution has, increased threat detection or found a threat for one of your clients?
Sure. I don't know how technical you want me to get. I don't want to bore everybody with nerdy cybersecurity stuff, but in general, it's no surprise to anyone that organizations are compromised and hacked all the time. And there's a few use cases that really stand out for businesses, I think. One is the ransomware threat that most companies are at least scared of if they haven't at least been affected by it in the past. And the problem with that is a problem of speed. So one of the things where AI technology really helps in this area is being able to react really quickly to stuff. So that's one thing. So that happens across the board. The other category is really high-end stealthy stuff. So the other thing that not all organizations need to worry about, but large and important organizations do become targets of nation-state sponsored activity. They need to be worried about the kind of threats that you just couldn't spot if you didn't have a 50-person GCHQ style security team in the past. So we have lots of examples of those sort of things where it's not the speed, it's the subtlety. For example, in 2020, there was a cyber espionage campaign by China called APT41. A particular customer of ours who was hit by it, and our technology was able to identify that, 2 weeks before it was like discovered, known on the headlines, and respond to it. So yeah, I could bore you all day with loads of war stories, but hopefully it gives you a flavor of the sort of things that go on.
It's having a kind of real world impact there in something as important as kind of cybersecurity. So thank you, Andrew. Ben, it'd be good now to talk a little bit more about Beamery, which I understand is a kind of talent acquisition platform. So you link talent with employers. I just want to find out more. How are you using AI in your business? I know you've spoken a lot about it allowing to have personalization and transparency as well. So if you could just tell us more about that.
Yeah, great question. So I guess to start off with, Beamery's talent lifecycle management platform helps the world's largest and most complex organizations identify, recruit, retain, develop, and redeploy talent. So really, it's a holistic solution to manage talent acquisition, bringing the best people into your organization, and then also talent development and talent management. And we use AI at every stage of this life cycle to help organizations provide a more personalized experience. We're also used to the consumer experiences, Netflix, etc. Those tend to go away in the workplace. So we're helping organizations bring that back both to external talent and also to internal employees, but also help them uncover the skills that they have today in their organization, the ones they're going to need tomorrow, and how they go about closing the gap. We have a workforce that's changing faster than it ever has, and organizations need the guidance to be able to understand whether they should go and hire high potential candidates from the market, develop internal talent, or strategically leverage contractors. And Beamery's solution obviously facilitates all of those.
And because conversely, people might say introducing technology and AI might kind of bring you away from personalization, but you see it doing the opposite.
Yeah, so again, it's a really good point, and I think this is where the transparency piece is incredibly important. What is important, I guess, in every business process, but particularly in hiring and talent management, is that AI is transparent and explainable. You can't have a kind of black box algorithm making recommendations. You need to be able to understand why those recommendations being made. And obviously with Beamery, we unpack every component, whether that's the fit of a candidate based on the industry they've worked in, or relevant adjacent skills they might have, and they end up enabling a human to make a better decision versus taking away that decision.
I'm guessing you've always had kind of AI in the business. It's maybe difficult to compare, from when you didn't to when you do now. But are you noticing in terms of like how it's impacting clients? Are they getting a better experience? Can you give us some kind of analytics around that?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. I think for us there are significant impacts to client experience at each stage of that talent lifecycle. So, for example, it could be recruiter productivity. Recruiters are able to identify the right candidates with the right skills faster. We've seen productivity increase by up to 40% in many instances. Or it could be companies being able to apply a more personalized experience to employees, help them locate internal career options. And again, we've seen tenure increase by over 2.5x in a lot of instances. And when we think about employee lifetime value, that's really where people tend to hit significant productivity, is after the first 1 to 2 years in their time with the company. So yeah, a lot of really great business benefits.
No, thanks, Ben. Really interesting to hear that. And Stuart, I'd like to bring you into the conversation now. As I understand, Sabio is a telecommunications business, which obviously you can tell us more about. I want to get a sense of how you are using AI in the company, Stuart. I know you've spoken about conversational AI and how it works and what it's used for. So if you could just explain to our audience some more about that.
Yeah, sure. So at Sabio, we help our customers to use technology to improve their customer experience and drive their digital transformation strategies. We do that, for customers like Sainsbury's and Marks and Spencer's and HomeServe and lots of the main, big insurers in the UK. A lot of our customers have contact centers. That's the heart of their organization. That's where a lot of the customer interactions are handled. And in the context of AI, we help them use conversational AI technology, either on voice channels or on chat, to engage customers to help them solve problems without the need to speak to a human. So, using chatbot and voice bot technology to drive more efficient interactions and allow customers to solve their problems really quickly without the need to speak to a human. And the other area, which I'm sure we can touch on later, is the ability to tap into a lot of the data that exists in these contact centers to understand who the customers are, why they're calling, and to drive better experiences.
And are you noticing that in these kind of companies you mentioned, like HomeServe, Sainsbury's, is that seeing jobs being kind of replaced, or are we seeing more jobs created to kind of manage and process this data, as you mentioned?
I think the overall net effect is that the interactions are being handled more efficiently, either in a shorter time or they're being deflected completely. However, the role of the kind of virtual customer service is increasing all the time, as we know, as more and more people do their business online. They want to interact with people, not necessarily face to face, but through digital channels. So the contact center sits behind that, and therefore is picking up a lot of that demand. The calls are becoming more complex and a lot more difficult to solve. So actually, the role and the skill sets behind that are becoming much more sophisticated as digitization, and AI in particular, takes away a lot of those simple transactions. So it's becoming a much more skilled role than what we would traditionally think of as an old school call center, maybe 5-10 years ago, particularly after the pandemic.
Thanks, Stuart. That's really interesting. We'll definitely come back to you as well. And Lucie, just like to bring you in now and just find out more about MySense.AI and how you're utilizing AI to improve healthcare outcomes.
Yeah, of course. So MySense is first and foremost a data analytics platform that takes a whole load of data from a number of passive sensors that we place around an individual's home, but also a whole load of contextual data that sits over the top. So we take into account things like environmental data, geospatial data in terms of understanding, access to services. We understand and overlay all of that data on top of the data that we collect from the individual's home, and essentially understand what normal looks like for the individual and where deviation has happened and why that change has happened. So, for example, we can pick up things like a decline in the ability to transition to sit to stand. We can pick up early signs of infection, for example. So a huge amount of data that's being used, and in the background, some quite advanced artificial intelligence to be able to understand the probability of something being a cause to somebody's decline in health.
And where, what's the end game for this, Lucie? Is this kind of technology being adopted by, the NHS, or is it maybe private medical, providers at the moment?
Yeah, so we're working across the NHS at the moment. We've got some extraordinary results coming out of the trust that we're working with. So we're seeing around a 47% reduction in unplanned admissions through the use of the technology, something like a 63% reduction in GP contacts as well. So it really is quite powerful using all of that contextual data to be able to build that pattern of an individual's lifestyle.
Dorothy, you to the panel now, and obviously you're coming at this from a slightly different angle, which is obviously you're a lawyer, and we've spoken to 4 different companies now. I mean, your initial thoughts on what you've heard so far, Dorothy.
Yeah, so Moore Barlow is a full service law firm, and I'm a partner in the commercial technology team, and in this team we deal with a lot of new and emerging technology. So we're helping businesses on both sides, whether they're developing AI products and services to sell to customers, or whether they're businesses who are buying in AI products. We help them both develop the AI tech and use the tech in a legally compliant way.
And what are some of the kind of legal issues that you're seeing come up? Obviously, that there are arguments around kind of bias and ethics, Dorothy. Can you just tell us more about that in terms of what you're seeing from your clients and in this space?
Data is a big issue. The ability to use and manipulate the data in a legally compliant way. We're also seeing you mentioned ethics and bias, and discrimination is another big issue, making sure that AI products don't discriminate between individuals in a way that would be unlawful. And we're also seeing a lot of discussion around the ownership of intellectual property rights. So there's masses of data out there that's being used both to train AI and to build AI products, and people want to own that because it has value. So understanding who is the owner of it, and who should own it, and how those rights should be used is really important, because it has a lot of value attached to it.
Thanks, Fran. Where do you think the line can be drawn between, obviously you'll have a lot of these companies will manage a lot of confidential technology and data, which they'll feel is confidential. They don't want that kind of made public. But is there an argument that there should be more transparency, and the users and the public have a right to kind of access that data and information?
Well, Ben mentioned earlier about transparency, and that's what we're finding, is that the government, the UK government, European Commission, they want to ensure that there is transparency in how AI arrives at a certain decision. So we're seeing laws in Europe, and we're seeing proposals for regulation in the UK that's encouraging that transparency, that understanding how decisions are made. But what we're seeing is that can conflict with the desire of companies to preserve the confidentiality of their algorithms and the processes that they use. But the lawmakers, certainly in Europe, in the UK, they recognise that, so they're putting in place processes which balance those interests of both transparency and confidentiality.
Thanks, Laura. Just one final point on that thread. So can you tell us about any legislation governing AI that the panel and our viewers should be aware of?
Yes, the big one is the EU Artificial Intelligence Act, and there's a proposed act at the moment, and that's going to look at introducing laws throughout Europe, harmonised across Europe, to introduce safe AI. That's a big one to look out for.
Okay, and has that been impacted at all by the UK leaving the EU? I know that was some years ago, but we're still kind of wading through that. Has that had an impact?
It has, to a certain extent, but what we've noticed is that the EU's also introducing its own laws, and the UK rather is introducing its own laws, and the UK government has recently, this is just only in July, published a policy paper that sets out its approach to regulating AI, and basically wants to encourage innovation and be the place to develop AI tools. So it wants regulators to focus on high risks rather than hypothetical or low risks associated with AI. So we can expect a white paper later this year, and we can also expect more regulation in the coming years in the UK.
Thanks, Dorothy. You can pause for breath now. That's all my questions for the moment for you. I'd like to now just open this question up to the floor. Maybe if you want to start with Andrew, as we started with you on the first thread, just kind of get back to some of the fundamentals of what is the aim of AI in a kind of business context. Is it to automate tasks or improve on already existing automation, or bring new capabilities that weren't available beforehand? Andrew, if you want to kind of start on that.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's going to be a mixture of lots of things, right? So you could probably split the space of applications into maybe scale and automation and efficiencies, and then new capabilities, I guess. So a lot of the tasks, as I think Stuart was kind of suggesting, are, there's a general principle, I think, in whenever you see AI being applied, that you take tasks that were repetitive, traditionally done tasks, and you kind of allow people to elevate to the next level of supervision, which I guess is just the ongoing trajectory of automation in the world, right? And so the hope is that it allows people to be more creative and have more fulfilling and interesting jobs, and then to play more of a strategic level rather than a tactical level in everything they do. I think that's definitely a large amount of it. But then I think I was really interested in what Lucie was talking about with MySense, right? Like, that sounds like sort of a genuinely new capability that we probably wouldn't have had previously, right? There probably wasn't a way to even begin to do that sort of thing before you had the ability to analyze this data. So I guess it's both. And I guess it comes down to whether you are automating tasks that aren't inherently database tasks, or you're doing things with data that are only doable algorithmically with data, which is where I think you get wholly new capabilities coming into it. So that'll be my kind of take.
Thanks, Andrew. I mean, Stuart, Andrew mentioned obviously what you guys are doing at Sabio. Is there anything you wanted to kind of add to what Andrew mentioned there?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with Andrew in that, fundamentally it comes down to automating tasks that once would have been handled by a human and are now through the development of machine learning, increasingly, a greater proportion of those customer-facing tasks can be handled by, ever sophisticated conversational AI technologies on voice and chat. And, every year we see incremental improvements in that technology. So essentially more and more tasks can be automated, and the tool sets that are needed to build those experiences also become simplified as well. So it becomes easier for even smaller businesses to be able to access that technology in a way they wouldn't have done before, combined with the kind of ever decreasing price and, through the cloud of that technology, which again democratizes it, makes it more available. So on the one hand, it's about automation of tasks, but equally, I think it's about making sense of the huge amounts of unstructured data that exists within most organizations. And obviously in our world, a lot of that is the trail of data that customers leave behind them when they engage through voice, through chat, and so on. And being able to access that data in ways that you wouldn't have done before, to really understand to a very high degree of accuracy who the customer is, why they're calling, what are their pain points, how can we learn from that to drive better experiences and fix issues that that the customers are facing, and access that data in ways that we just couldn't have done before. And I think they're the two key areas, I think, where machine learning and AI is really transforming the way that organizations do business today.
Thanks, Stuart. Lucie, is there anything you wanted to add to that thread?
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Andrew. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of where we are. We just wouldn't be able to analyze in real time all of the information that we're gaining from all of the discrete, both sensors and context information that we get in. And so I think you're absolutely right. Without AI, we wouldn't probably exist in the way that we do. But coming back to Ben's point earlier, you have to do it in a way that is totally transparent. We're dealing with people's health data here. So we also need to be doing it in a way that's ethical, that is repeatable, essentially, and make sure that we are very clear about who owns that data in the process. And I think, the temptation with the huge amounts of data that we're all dealing with is to try and keep it to ourselves and make it something that belongs to us. But I think it's really important as organizations that we understand, where that data was generated from, and therefore ultimately where potentially that ownership should sit. And I think that's really critical.
Thanks. And on that point, Lucie, where do you think that argument will end up being solved in terms of where the ownership of data kind of sits?
I think we've been in a situation where, I think it was described for many years that data is the new gold, and everyone's sort of out to mine it. We're seeing subtle changes. If you take a look at, even governmental policies, you take a look at, for example, the new data strategy coming out of Scotland, they're very much pushing now towards patient ownership or resident ownership of their data, and having a much more federated approach to data ownership. And I think with new technologies coming out, obviously we're all aware of blockchain and various other things out there, this federated ownership, this kind of responsibility of looking after your own data, I think is going to become more and more of something that consumers are after. So, we've definitely took that approach. I mean, we ask for a lot of trust with the individuals that we support. Obviously, we go into their home, we monitor their daily activities. We wouldn't be able to do those things if we weren't able to sort of promise them that they own their data sets, and ethically, we're a good company to work for. So, or work with. So I think, in some cases it will suit an individual's business model. It certainly suits ours, and we're a B Corp, so that's where we want to be. But in other places, I think the market will force the change in kind of how people approach that.
Thanks, Lucie. That's really interesting. Ben, is there anything you wanted to add to this thread?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of great ground. I think there's a couple of things that I'd add. So the first is that, in the same way that this is true of any implementation of technology, what has to happen is an organization needs to have very clear goals as to what they are trying to achieve through, bringing in an AI-driven solution. 10% really of the impact of technology is the technology itself. The remaining 90% is the way it's deployed, the strategy around it. So I think that's always really important to recognize. The second is that, we've touched a lot on kind of control and transparency that's required around AI, as well as, productivity gains and, advantageous new capabilities that can be added by AI. What we see a lot is that strenuous, business critical processes that, are done infrequently because they are challenging to put together. Things like, workforce planning or succession planning within organizations, things that take a lot of time investment and instantly fall out of date, right? Just by the very nature of the process. AI can create a situation where those can be done in an agile, continuous way, which can add an enormous amount of value to organizations. So I think what we're seeing is not just productivity gains, but actually the reinvention of business critical processes that will allow organizations to become more agile, more strategic, and make better long-term investments.
Thanks, Ben. That's really interesting. Dorothy, I just want to bring you in here. Ben mentioned that AI has potential to unlock productivity in the UK, which we know we do have a slight issue with that, depending on how we kind of measure it. But in terms of, if you get back to that fundamental question about AI, is it something that every business should be looking at now? We spoke to the journalist Bernard Marr recently, said if you're in busy not looking at it, you're going to miss out. But then you get some other people saying that, it isn't always necessary in every kind of company and setting. I mean, what are your views on that, Dorothy?
There's definitely AI is here to stay, and there are vastly sort of increasing number of AI products and services. So definitely businesses should look at AI for their business and look at adopting them. But it's important that they do that to make sure that it's effective, and it's effective for their business. It's going to be useful in their business and going to drive the goals of the business, and that it can be used in a lawful way, because generally with some of the legal risks that are associated with using AI, the responsibility for compliance is going to fall on the user of the AI, and the liability if it's not used in a lawful way.
Thanks, Dorothy. And just going to move on to a new question. It was one that was very sort of popular amongst our kind of viewers as well. It was how people are funding AI projects, and are they able to access funding as easy as kind of maybe more traditional companies? I know we've got businesses of varying size on the panel, but maybe Lucie, if you wanted to kind of start with that in terms of how have you funded your investment in this technology, and have you found that quite straightforward?
I mean, we've been in existence for 6 years. We're still a relatively small company, so I think sort of by scale and size, I'm sure some of the other panel members will be able to kind of bring in some of the ways that they've looked to invest. For us, because our business really wouldn't exist without the AI and the technology that sits behind it, it's always been part of the proposition going out to shareholders and obviously taking the product out to market as quickly as we can. So we've been very fortunate in terms of our investment, and it's the fundamental basis on which they've invested in the actual company itself. So that's the kind of heartbeat of what we are and who we are. There are grant opportunities out there if you've got a great idea in terms of AI, and Innovate UK has a number of different opportunities on its roster, as does some of the other grant funding organizations here in the UK and across Europe. So it's definitely worth looking at those if you have an idea and you want to create a startup. But from a general business perspective, I think it takes a lot of investment. And I think anyone that wants to come into this space, whether you're in a large corporate, which I spent my years in before starting this business up, or after, I think you need to understand that this is not a quick fix. If you're going to invest in building AI, you really do need to make sure that you've got not only decent quality data, because obviously you need that to start with, but you also need to make sure that you've got the right teams on the ground to be able to manage and create the pipelines and actually build the systems. And some people will have different definitions of AI. I think that's the other critical thing here. So, we use lots of different types of AI. We use a bunch of dynamic Bayesian sort of methodologies, as well as using natural language generation for the reports that we create. So there are lots of different types and flavors of AI that kind of exist out there. And in some cases, some people will refer to what is probably not for us something that we would consider AI, but a basic kind of rules engine sitting in the background. Is still classified as such under their terminology. So I think if you're going into this space, be really clear what it is and the complexity and the depth that you're going into, and then resource accordingly, because it is not a small undertaking.
Thanks, Lisa. That's really interesting. Ben, I just wanted to get an insight into kind of Beamery's journey in terms of how you funded your kind of AI solution, and have you found it a similar process to kind of Lisa? I know they are very different companies.
Yeah, and look, we've been in the market a little bit longer, just kind of 9 or 10 years. I think, look, the fundamental barometer for me is to, as a business, are you able to access funding? Is, the value you're providing to organizations, right? Are you helping the clients and the customers you work with achieve the business transformation that they're looking for? Now, today, a big part of that comes back to being an innovation partner. And I think what we're seeing is that AI is transforming, all of these key business processes, and therefore is a critical part of your ability as a software company to help your clients drive the type of transformation they're looking for. But ultimately, it still comes down to those outcomes, right? If you have powerful AI that doesn't help the organizations you work with, that's a bit of a non-starter. Okay,
no, thanks, Ben. And Stuart, I know, Sabio's, maybe a more established company, but just want to get your kind of insight into how you have funded these projects, and do you have, plans to kind of take your investment and development of AI further in the company?
Yeah, so I think, the interesting thing about how we apply AI is that some of the stuff that we do today, particularly thinking about things like speech recognition, natural language processing, synthetic speech, were once driven by, rules as opposed to machine learning. And what machine learning's done over the last few years is just accelerate the capability and the depth of what these platforms can do. So at a fundamental level, machine learning is really just increasing the capabilities of what once was a rules-based approach to doing things. And I think if you're an organization that's developing products, then it's really important, as Lucie said, to really understand at a fundamental level how to leverage different algorithms, how to drive machine learning, how to build it into your products. But as an end consumer, ultimately, we want to get to the point where AI kind of disappears and it's democratized and it's built into a product in a way that the end customer doesn't know they're using AI. It's just built into their CRM system or whatever platform they happen to be using. So from our perspective, we are leveraging a lot of the capabilities that exist in the cloud through partners like Google and Amazon and Microsoft and Nuance and so on, taking their APIs, building them into our own products, and serving that out to our clients in ways that often they don't necessarily realize they're using AI. They just see a marked improvement in performance in things like speech recognition, natural language, etc. So that's kind of how I see it. And ultimately, it comes down to there being a strong return on investment for deploying a bit of technology in your organization. It just has to show a return of some sort, either productivity improvements or improvements in customer experience, and that's ultimately what's going to drive the end customer to make a decision about whether they use it or not.
No, thanks. I think that is a really important point, isn't it, Stuart? That it's got to have a some kind of return, whether it is monetary or productivity. Andrew, is there anything you wanted to add to this thread about funding AI projects?
Not really. I think it's been covered really well. But I guess picking off what Stuart just said there, like I think the same thing applies for like private equity funding. If you're raising funding for your business, right? Like presumably the reason companies are starting up using AI-based approaches is because it allows them to grow and do faster customer acquisition and have lower margins. And so, like I think the funding question really just comes down to traditional metrics of revenue generation, and AI allows companies to be effective with that stuff. I mean, we had an interesting journey last year because we IPO'd in the UK, and there's a lot of skepticism around the UK equity markets and their ability to correctly value sort of AI companies, tech companies, fast-moving, innovative growth companies. There aren't many of them listed in the UK, but we had a positive experience. We had a really good IPO. I think the markets value it. So I think it's so ubiquitous now that it's not even really an investment decision whether or not to invest in a company that uses AI, I think, anymore.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And Dorothy, I just want to get your kind of thoughts. Andrew does make a good point there about valuing AI companies as well. I guess we're quite early in that journey, but you'll be a good barometer in the sense that you've got quite breadth of clients and many of them working with AI. Do you see similar stories to what you've heard now?
Yes, we do. We see a lot of these new to market technologies. They're looking for funding, and as Lucie mentioned, there is funding out there, and Innovate is just one of those. But what we notice is common to all of the organizations that are investing in these technologies is they want to know what they're investing in. They want to know what the opportunities are, and the one thing that we would say we do advise our clients, and we would recommend to anybody, is for when you've got an AI product, make sure that you've got your business ready for investment, and that means understanding what your IT estate is and making sure that you've protected the intellectual property in your business, because sometimes a business can have an AI product, but when the investors kind of dig around and do their due diligence on a company, they realize that there aren't license agreements in place, there's no trademark registration, the copyright is owned by third-party developer, but perhaps in software is owned by third-party developers. So and it hasn't always been assigned to the business. So it's really important to secure for a business that's sort of has an IP product, an AI product and service, to make sure you secure that IP, know what you own and know what you don't own, and make sure you're clear on the basis on which you have a right to use third-party IP.
Thanks, Dorothy. And just to clarify, because I think that would be important to our viewers. So, how is it decided who owns the IP for AI when considering the output of AI?
So generally, when it's the input of intellectual property in a platform, it's going to be a bundle of different intellectual property rights. So there'll be copyright in the software, algorithms will be protected by the law of confidence, any databases that either data sets that are used to train the AI or that form part of the system, they might be protected as a copyright work or qualify for protection as a database. But ownership of an intellectual property right is generally decided by law firstly, and then by agreement between the parties. And generally at law, the creator of an intellectual property right is going to be the first owner of it, unless it's been created by an employee in the course of their employment, in which case it's owned by the employer. So if you want to own the intellectual property rights in your AI platform, or at least you want to own aspects of it, so you want to own the database or you want to own the software, then you'd make sure that you document this in your agreement with any third parties. And when it comes to the output, well, AI doesn't have any legal personality, so it's not recognized as an inventor, but copyright works that are generated by an AI system, it could be designs, software, then they are protected by UK copyright works, copyright law, and often the effect of this law could be that either the AI provider or the organization that's using the tool may own the output in the AI system. So again, it comes back to the point that on the question of IP ownership in the output, we'd say document that in your agreement.
Okay, no, thanks, Dorothy. That's really interesting. Lucie, did you want to add something there? Or?
No, it's very interesting. I mean, when we first set up, we used a software house before we brought on board all our developers and data scientists in house. And luckily we had some good lawyers at the time, because they were very clear about what we needed to make sure and how we needed to protect ourselves during those initial early days. We've actually replatformed about twice since then, so we've got no concerns about ownership, and certainly none of our data science has ever been done by third parties. But I just think it's really important, particularly if you're starting out on this journey, to make sure that you're covered.
No, thanks, Lucie. Yeah, good point there. Make sure you've got a good lawyer, Dorothy. So do contact Moore. But I just want to now, we're coming to the close of the debate, but I just want to talk about sort of jobs and skills, both from an internal perspective, but also the jobs market in general. And Stuart, I just want to start with you and just focusing on Sabio in terms of how do you find it recruiting the talent you need to develop and to stay on top of these AI solutions that you're building? How are you recruiting? Where are you recruiting from?
It's a challenge. I think anyone recruiting in today's job market knows that it's really difficult to both attract and retain talent. So it's a huge challenge, I think, for a lot of organizations. In terms of where we access resources, I think the pandemic has definitely taught us how to work remotely much more effectively, and that's allowed us to cast our net, further afield to other regions outside of the UK to help recruit for some of these really specialist skills that we need to develop, the products that we're building. But equally, at the same time, I think because of a lot of what we do is about understanding how customers converse with organizations using messaging and speech in particular. It's really important to have a good cultural understanding about each of the regions that we operate in. We need to understand, the different dialects. We need to understand the different intonations and the tone of voice and so on. When we create experiences for the end customer, we're building conversational experiences. We need to really design them in a way that is intuitive for people to use and that takes into account, the way that people speak, inflection and different aspects of linguistics. So I think it's a combination of having, specialist skills to build the products out, but ultimately as they're implemented in the field, it's important to have that cultural understanding about where the technology is deployed to really make sure that it's working well for the customer and achieving its business objectives.
That's really interesting. So do you employ kind of, when you talk about cultural angle, is that linguists or is it just people who have a kind of knowledge of the area, and how do you do that?
It's a combination of things. So we have user interface designers across voice and chat, for example, that have a lot of expertise around how to answer a question, how to ask a question to the customer and how to solicit the right response, how to build out a multi-step conversation that's driven by AI. And from a linguistics perspective, again, understanding, like I say, the different ways in which people converse and the cultural cues and aspects of that, so that we can create experiences that are as natural as possible for humans. And then, like I say, it's more the deep tech stuff, if you like, the deep machine learning stuff can sit in the product team. That's more decoupled from the front end customer experience.
No, thanks, Stuart. I think that gives a really good insight into how that kind of journey works. And Andrew, in terms of Darktrace, how are you finding it getting the talent you need to deliver the solutions that you want for your customers?
We've never really struggled on the software development dev side. We've got great relationships with the University of Cambridge. We have a strong presence there. It's our headquarters, so we kind of siphon in talent as it kind of comes out of university. It's more on the cybersecurity side of our business that you struggle to get the talent that you need, because there's a real skills shortage in cybersecurity. So what we ended up doing as an organization was just taking people with a much wider background than you would traditionally do, and training them rapidly. And so it's kind of an interesting test of our technology, because a lot of the point of our technology is that we've designed it to be operated by customers with a lower level of expertise than you would traditionally require to run a security team, because a lot of traditional approaches are like really specialist tools and you have to be like a cyber ninja to be able to use them. So we kind of aligned our product development goals with our own corporate development strategy, so that we built a technology that, in order to do the things we want to do for our customers, would have to be a technology that internally we could manage and use and develop without those same specialist skills. So that's kind of how we tried to square that circle.
Well, thanks, Andrew. That's interesting. Ben, is there anything you wanted to add? Obviously, I know you acquire talent for your customers, but in terms of acquiring your own talent, how have you found that?
Yeah, I guess I can kind of give you both both sides of the coin here, because we obviously have a pretty unique perspective just based on the market that we operate in. I mean, I think both for us and for our customers, right, there is a limited talent pool, right, of folks that have these skills, particularly if you look at the core markets that any business operates in, right? So what's incredibly important is developing an ability to understand not just who has the skills that you need today, but who might be able to develop them tomorrow, right? And actually, ironically, this is where AI can help, right? In terms of identifying talent that has the potential to become, the kind of skilled labor that you need, and give you an opportunity to either develop that talent internally or to be able to identify it from the market. I think that the broader point here around what AI will do to job creation and job change over the next 5 to 10 years is it'll make the traits that are uniquely human more and more important, right? We know that AI is going to automate business processes, going to increase productivity. It's going to take out a lot of work that is based on manual input. All of that is going to mean that the things like creativity, empathy, the traits that really are a deep part of who we all are as humans, those are going to become more and more important in the workplace.
That's really interesting, Ben, when you talk about the wider impact of AI on the jobs market. And in terms of, so if you were to say to someone, they're in their kind of, teens now, what kind of, you did touch on that, but what kind of skills and traits should they be developing to be ready for this world in 30, 40 years?
Yeah, look, it's if I had the answer to that, then I might be doing something different. But look, I think for me, it's thinking deeply about, what makes you excited about work, and focusing on leaning into those things, right? Because if you're early in your career, you haven't started your career, that's always the first place to start. I think, though, if we think about a future in which AI is driving a lot of the business processes that right now, humans are a part of, then really it is those kind of quote unquote soft skills that become more and more important. So, developing those, developing collaboration, creativity, working well with others. These are things that are never going to change. These are things that are always going to be important. And, that's certainly what I would recommend leaning into. I think the other thing, by the way, that is interesting about the impact that AI can have here is that can shine a more effective light on the skill degradation that we're seeing in the market. In general, the kind of life of a skill in many businesses is sort of 3 to 5 years. And, without AI, it's actually harder to kind of pinpoint that. So AI is not only kind of leading to this change in terms of the skills that are valuable, it's also shining a light on the process and helping organizations understand the skill density within different parts of their business, and helping or enabling them to run better upskilling and redeployment programs to ensure that folks that maybe are currently working in jobs that, will no longer be a priority over the next 5 years, are upskilled or reskilled and, redeployed into different areas of the organization.
Thanks, Ben. We really appreciate your insight there. And Lucie, just want to get your thoughts on the wider impact on the jobs market that AI will have, and how you feel that playing out.
I think it's interesting. I mean, we likewise don't have a huge problem in terms of recruitment. We're a mission-driven organisation, and I think a lot of people identify with the sort of mission that we're on. I think what's really interesting is finding those people, as Ben says, that have got those unique elements to their character, to their personality, to their ability to learn. You know, when we're going through those screening exercises and going through those interviews, what we're really looking for are people that have a great sense of empathy. That's really critical to us, but more importantly, are compulsive learners. So we need people in the organization that love to learn, that don't come with their folder of this is what I've done, this is what I've achieved, these are all the qualifications I've got, therefore you must respect what I bring to the table. That's fine, and you know, and there is an element of respect with that. But if you aren't able to keep up with the rest of the organization and the learning curve that we're all going on, then that's no good to us. You know, we need someone that wants to be at the forefront, is pushing themselves, trying to learn as much as possible. And I think having this obsession, this lifelong love of learning, I think is going to be super critical. And so as you look back, and we've got a great relationship with the University of Warwick and a number of different universities that we work with, as you look back to the sort of students and all the kids coming up, what we need to do is give them that joy of wanting to continue to learn, to be obsessive about getting on to the next thing, because that's what's going to hold people in good stead as they move forward in their careers. The world is changing. We need to be adept and brilliant at changing with it. And this compulsion for learning, I think, is such a critical skill that has to be there in the future.
Well, thanks, Suze. That's a really good point. That lifelong learning, like you say, that compulsion for learning is going to be critical, isn't it? And I mean that we've actually reached our time limit on that. So what we wanted to just move to now is a final word. I just want to say thank you for taking part in the debate, Ben. Yeah. So your kind of final summary.
Yeah, well, look, we've covered a lot of ground. So, I mean, a big thank you to you for putting together such an interesting panel. I think that the final word is, as we've touched on, AI has a significant, potentially significant impact in terms of positively impacting business processes. The way we work is going to change pretty significantly over the next 10 to 20 years to kind of tie in AI more effectively into the world of work. But, you know, particularly in the short and medium term, businesses do need to be really keenly aware of their responsibility to use ethical AI, adhere to new regulation, and ensure that they're deploying these algorithms in a transparent and effective way. So yeah, look, I think it's been a great debate, and hopefully folks who have tuned in have taken away a lot of great stuff.
No, thank you, Ben. Much appreciated. And Stuart, again, thank you for your time today explaining more about what the Sabio Group do. Yeah, it'd be great to just hear your final word.
Thanks, Ollie. I think it's just important to remember, you know, that we're on this continuous development path with AI. You know, where we are today is ahead of where we were last year, and will be next year is ahead of where we are today, and that will continue for many years and decades into the future. I think, you know, we're still a long way from the point at which, in our world, conversational AI reaches its point of maximum utility. And I think we'll get there when it disappears, you know, when it just becomes embedded in our daily lives and we're having conversations with computers in a way that we do with normal people, and it just becomes invisible. So I think that's the ultimate goal. That's when it reaches its point of maximum utility. But, you know, we're still a good few years away from that happening yet.
No, thanks, Stuart. Definitely fascinating stuff going on at Sabio, and likewise at Darktrace. I just want to say thanks for your time today and your final thought.
Well, thank you. It's been really, really interesting. I think the final thought, pulling out from a few of the things we talked about, to do with like, how do you get funding? How's AI being used? It would be a kind of like takeaway for anyone listening who's trying to make decisions, I guess, about how to cut through the hype or whether XYZ AI technology is right for them. It would just be to like focus on understanding the approach that this organization or this technology is taking, and whether it is genuinely different as an approach, if you can explain it without using the word AI, to what was being done before. It doesn't really matter what kind of flavor of AI is in a technology. What you're looking for is a new approach to a problem that you haven't seen before, and whether the approach makes sense is what I'd say.
Okay, no, it's sage advice, Andrew. So thank you for that. Lucie, thank you to yourself as well for coming along, explaining more about MySense.AI and the great work you're doing. So yeah, your final thoughts.
I think really it's just to mirror some of Ben's points around making sure that you have transparent and ethical approaches to dealing with AI. I think as it becomes more omnipresent, people are going to feel more acutely aware of people using their data for specific business outcomes, and I think that's going to be something that they're going to want to be able to understand and be educated on. I think the other thing is that it is inevitable. The technology is here; we can't rewind it now. So I think being part of it and understanding how techniques, whether they're statistical or more rules-based, is coming, and being part of it and understanding how it can apply to your business is really critical for the future.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lucie. And Dorothy, thanks for your input today, obviously from the legal perspective. Yeah, what was your summary of the discussion?
Well, I think my final thoughts, takeaways really, would be new laws are emerging, and keep an eye on them, especially if you operate in a regulated sector or the AI system is high risk. A lot of the new laws are at consultation stage, so get involved in the consultation. This is your opportunity to have a say in what laws are going to be implemented. And then when it comes to building the AI, I'd say absolutely, you must build in checks and controls to make sure the AI solution doesn't learn to perform unlawfully. And I think a final takeaway would be that the contract is king at this stage. So make sure you address things like ownership of IP and allocation of risk in the contract for any aspect of your AI solution and use of it.
Thanks, Dorothy. Definitely marrying that legal case with the business case is important with AI. I just want to say thank you to all our panel again and everyone that tuned in to watch. Do follow us at www.businessleader.co.uk. Thank you.